Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cash Up, a weekly show where we converse with amazing folks in DFIR. And today I'm so excited to be joined by my friend, Aaron Sparling. Aaron is currently an officer with the Portland Police Bureau, PPB, where he serves in the Investigations Branch, Forensic Evidence Division, Digital Forensics Unit. He has also served as a task force officer on the United States Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force and the Portland FBI Oregon Cybercrimes Task Force. Aaron's also the chairman of the Technical Advisory Council for the U.S. Secret Service National Computer Forensics Institute, NCFI, as well as a U.S. Navy veteran. Aaron earned a bachelor's degree from Prescott College and holds multiple certifications, including the Magnet Certified Forensics Examiner, MCFE, GIAC Certified Forensic Analyst, GCFA, GIAC Certified Forensics Examiner, GCFE, GIAC Reverse Engineering Malware Analyst, GREM, GIAC Security Essential Certification, GSEC, and the IASIS Certified Forensics Computer Examiner, CFCE. Aaron regularly shares his knowledge and presentations, speaking on topics such as memory forensics and automation at HTCIA International Conference, DFRWS, the Magnet User Summit, and the SANS DFIR Summit. He was also a volunteer and host sponsor for the DFRWS US in Portland for 2019. Aaron has an upcoming SANS webcast this Friday on finding code injection using memory analysis, and an upcoming presentation on December 10th as part of Memory Day at HTCIA. I'm very fortunate to not only have collaborated with Aaron on a multitude of content about memory forensics, but to have gotten to know him as a real friend. You won't find a better foodie to tour a city with, and to top it off, he has the best socks. And with that, hi, Aaron.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. And man, that was a long intro.
Well, you've done a lot of really cool things. You've worked on a lot of certs. You serve in a lot of different capacities at NCFI and the task forces you're involved with and the work you do at your lab. You've spoken a ton of places. Like, that's not my long introduction.
Right.
That's just who you are. And you've done really, really cool things for the community, and you give a lot to share. So I really appreciate everything you do, and it's important people know how much you do and how much you share and how much cool stuff you have coming up this week. I feel like you are like the dude this week because we're like in this memory focus all over the place, right? Like you wrote the question this week for the Memory Forensics Challenge for Magnet.
Yes.
You are doing a memory presentation for SANS this week.
I am.
You're a guest on Cash Up.
Yeah.
You were on Control Alt Delete last week.
I was.
And what else? You're speaking at HTCIA Memory Day alongside Alyssa Torres and Jamie Levy. That's going to be an incredible day at HTCIA.
That's going to be a fun day for sure. So that just means I don't have a no mechanism. Like, apparently I just don't know how to say no, is what that really comes down to.
So what I realized is some of that basically Heather and I ask you to do things.
Yes, basically.
That's really the answer to the combination of that list of things you're doing these 2 weeks.
Pretty much.
And you had, well, to be honest, you were busy for a little bit there. Now you're a little bit less busy, so now you're busy because you were less busy.
Yes. Yes, it's always, it's like you think you're not busy and you think you have big gaps of time, and then all of a sudden you're like, how did my calendar fill up?
They fill up. So I'm just excited because you have so much great information to share. Oh, and you wrote a guest blog post. So some of it's just that you've done things that are now hitting, right? So you wrote the memory challenges a good month ago. You wrote a guest blog post on something else that's going to be hitting a good month ago. So
it's total serendipity.
It's just that everything's hitting right now. That's all. Kevin said it's Aaron Sparling week.
Well, there's been a few Kevin weeks. So
there's been quite a few Kevin weeks. They're usually involve CTFs.
That's why I don't do CTFs, exactly. So it's just like
I'm gonna say that's not true. I remember the Magnet CTF in 2018. Was it the 2018 one or 2019
one? Are we talking about Nashville?
Nashville. So it's 2019.
Yep.
And I had a question in there about where the user was in terms of time zone on a particular day. And Aaron, instead of looking at the evidence, do you remember what you did? Because I walked behind your desk and I was like,
I used OSINT and attacked your Twitter account and figured out what your travels were.
He was like, Jessica had to have had this phone. It's been all over the world. I'm gonna OSINT Jessica.
So I knew that you had gone to like Australia and then to APAC, and so I just sort of tracked your movement and then answered the question that way.
Yeah,
it was faster.
Instead of actually looking at the data on the device, which you could use to solve the question, Aaron solved the question by sending my
Those
Twitter.
that know me know that that was a mobile device question, and there was no way I was probably going to be able to figure that one out anyway. So I had to figure out a workaround. So I figured, why not use OSINT? So I used OSINT.
And for anyone who's not paying attention to your handle that's right below you, your handle's OSINT LabWorks on Twitter. So I was like, this is apropos for Aaron, who I know is not a mobile forensics guru, but he's a maven in other areas like OSINT and memories. So it was definitely apropos. But I just walked up and because, I'm walking behind and I'm seeing what people are doing. And I see you doing a complete scan on my Twitter account for the time frame in question. I was like, oh, all right, he's smart. So, with all of these things you're doing and have done, I mean, what was kind of your path to get to where you are?
Oh, wow. So, definitely circuitous, and some might even say frenetic.
My favorite Aaron word.
Yeah. So how did I get here, basically?
Yeah.
So it involved standing on a tarmac at an airport, more or less. And so, like all good stories, they always have like this great intro. And I guess I always had an interest in computers and just sort of electronics and anything mechanical. I remember I'm going to date myself here, but I remember in like third grade, during the winter sometimes in Oregon can be quite wet. And I remember, going to the library because we had two, they were kind of like Apple IIe clones. I think they were the Bell and Howell is who made them. They're like black. They weren't even like that off-white. And you would go in and play like Oregon Trail, or you would write these like great little graph programs.
Oh, I never thought about that. You were playing Oregon Trail in Oregon. That's so weird to me. I played Oregon Trail in Jersey as a little girl.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like having like the original like concert T-shirt before they were cool, right? Like, I knew that band before. Well, I knew Oregon Trail before. So, I think looking back, like there was always sort of like the intellectual curiosity. I think I was always sort of drawn to like one of like my favorite things is that I got from my grandfather when he passed away is like this old drafting kit, and you open it up and it's got all these really neat slide rules, and it's kind of interesting to see that you can solve problems with these sort of mechanical devices. And so I always found that to be intriguing. And then like everything in life, you sort of spin off into these other directions. And so, I did the military out of high school. And then after that, I went to college in Arizona to Prescott College. And then I spent almost a decade in the outdoor industry as a professional mountain guide, of all things.
I can see it.
I worked for the American Alpine Institute. And then, sort of got into law enforcement, and then I got, worked the road, worked the street, as we say. Deputies work the road, officers work the street. So worked the street, and then I got into an intelligence unit position, and then part of our mission was dignitary protection, and so we would work with state service, Capitol Police, and so I was assigned to a U.S. Secret Service detail, a DIG Pro detail, and we're like, me and another agent are standing on this tarmac waiting. We're doing the site for arrival, talking about some case stuff, and he just kind of casually mentions like, oh, you'd be a great candidate for our Nitro program. Well, like all good things in the government, there's got to be an acronym attached to it. So I'm like, Nitro, please explain. And so that is essentially their network intrusion responder program. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I would love to see what that's all about. And which is actually a more, like, I guess, untraditional way to get into the field. Like most folks, at least my peers in law enforcement, seems like they come from an investigative unit and then they get involved with maybe like child exploitation type cases and they get sponsored by like an ICAC type unit.
Right.
And then they come in that way.
Not typically intrusions. Like
No,
intrusions
no.
is what's actually the unique element because people don't usually think of law enforcement conducting intrusion cases, to be
No,
frank.
absolutely not. And so I get nominated for a nitro course. I had to defer it out because I got picked up by another unit within my agency, which keeps me very busy and up in the middle of the night. And so they sent me to my first course ever. Well, I did do like a 1 week Celebrite kind of cell phone course before Celebrite had. It was through NW3C.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of cell phone knowledge, but I mean, when I went through, it looked like a Game Boy that you would, and it was all flip phones. And then
Oh, yeah.
you had that like giant roll-on case that had like every dongle that you would never use, right? And
Yeah,
so
every single connector for all the different phones. And, you used to have to hit the F3 button and it had the
yes,
arrows. Yes,
yes,
the
yeah,
legacy
it
box real
reminded me of
useful.
like those little like football games that you played in the 80s, you know? Yes, yes, exactly. So I did have that, but I was getting ready to go to this nitro course, but instead they send me to a 1 week point of sales malware investigation course. Now, mind you, no file system level forensics at all, no traditional forensics training at all. And that was kind of like, here you go, kid, have at it. And so my first experience to it was a 1 week POS course. It was a great course. It was put on by they brought in a vendor that did it. It was Trustwave. Spider Labs did it. Christopher Pogue actually taught the
Okay.
class. Really great class, and he's a great instructor. If you know
Yeah.
Chris, um, I think it's with Nuix now, or he was with Nuix. I don't know if he still is. But and then I went through the 3 week nitro course, and then from there I just sort of branched out and started taking more classes, and then just kind of got addicted to it after that. And then from there, I worked in the Portland Secret Service office in their lab for a little while until we built out our facility here at PPB and started standing up what we currently have.
That is so awesome. I love the fact that you actually went in through the intrusion realms. And again, I think a lot of people do not think of law enforcement officers having that experience in working those types of cases. But it's the reason, to be honest, that you're so good with memory analysis because it's so pertinent in those types of cases.
It is, and it's definitely kind of more my wheelhouse. It's definitely where I spend most of my free time doing like any sort of research or stuff back in the community. It tends to be more in that realm. So yeah, it definitely is a little. It was interesting. I remember being in the 3 week nitro course, and which is at NCFI, the National Computer Forensic Institute in Hoover, Alabama, and they only run 16 students. They keep it small. It's because it's considered an advanced course. And I was the only one in there that had like no file system level forensics at all.
Right.
Had like everyone else was like a seasoned tenure, 6 to 14-year examiner. Most of them had some sort of like either like a CFCE from IASIS. There was even a couple like folks in there that had gone through GIAC. And had like a GCFA. There was like a couple of GCFAs in there. So, definitely that there was some really skilled, task force officers that were taking this course. And then here comes me, right, with like nothing. And, but just fell in love with it and was like totally hooked on it. And
now, years later, not only was it your start, but you're now the chairman of the Technical Advisory Council for NCFI. So
yes.
Now it's come full circle, and now you are one of the most technical people who is sharing that knowledge. So going in there, and I guess it just shows people that if you do walk into something and you feel like you're drinking from that fire hose, I don't have the same background as everybody else in this room, it doesn't mean you can't be successful, because Aaron, as his bio when we started stated, as everything he's doing is showing you, is extremely successful. Does amazing work, is sought after by the entire community for his knowledge, advises people all the time on their cases. He's just an all-around great guy who knows his stuff. And at the moment that you started, you felt that sensation of being that overwhelm. Everybody else here has all these certs. What am I doing here? And it's just to show you that if you feel that way now, it's okay. Just dig in.
Okay.
Just dig in, right? Like, just dig in and do it.
I think, if to sort of piggyback on that and maybe like a little nugget to folks that are just jumping into it, instead of being intimidated by that. I would say be empowered by that, right? So like I was inspired by what the people around me had already achieved and not so much intimidated by it. I was like, I want to know more about what that person has done, or how did they get there, or what was your path to being this successful, right? And so I was constantly picking their brain and asking them about, well, hey, what courses do you think I should take, or what books do you think I should read, or almost like that annoying little brother, which
But it's great because you're being put in a situation where you have an opportunity to learn from all the people you're around. I mean, that's one of the reasons I hang out with you, right? Is I always try to surround myself with people who I can learn from.
Oh, absolutely.
And hanging out with those people who have knowledge sets that are akin to yours or different than yours is how you can really learn about how to expand your horizons. So that is just so awesome. So we talked about a bunch of things that you're working on, right? Do you want to share a little bit about what some of these presentations you have coming up will cover in case people are interested in them?
Yeah, so
you got the SANS talk. Yeah.
The SANS talk, and that is going to be focusing on, it's going to be all focused on memory analysis, looking for code injection. But more importantly, kind of like the title says, is the sort of thesis, if you will, is what do you do when your tool, and I'm sure if there's folks that don't do memory analysis and memory forensics, but do mobile, especially like mobile and file system level forensics, what do you do when your tool is kind of telling you a story, but it's not completing the story? Meaning we get so used to or so accustomed to our forensics tools, because they've gotten so good over the last probably 4 or 5 years at getting us a really good picture, or actually taking us 3, 4, 5 steps granularly down to the data source, that we have this whole picture, and so we feel really good about it. Where maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we would get like a hint or a pointer, and then we would have to go manually figure it out. So what do you do when that happens with your memory analysis, where you're seeing something, the plugin is giving you like this indicator, or a possible indicator that you could quickly dismiss as being like, oh, a false positive, or there's no data here, when in fact that is actually where everything resides. And how do you as examiner see that, and then take your sort of intellectual curiosity to go figure that out? And that's really what I'm going to hope to accomplish on Friday.
I love that, Aaron. I do a lot with mobile, and last night I was teaching my mobile forensics course, and the entire purpose of my lecture last night was to focus the students on identifying what the tool isn't showing you. And because like you said, we kind of get into this rut where we're like, oh, the tool is showing us all these things, right? So you start people on doing manual analysis, and then you give them the fancy tools and you let them see, and you have them do some exploration in some labs where they're identifying things easily with the tools that they had to do manually first. But then you go and you give them labs where absolutely zero of the evidence is identifiable by the tools. And the focus becomes instead, how do I know what I'm missing? How do I identify what I'm missing? And how do I know even when it's important for me to look after that stuff? Because at the end of the day, time is everything in our field.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it's a really, really good point. So I'm really excited to hear your talk on Friday and kind of get that feel for that. Yesterday, you were our guest question opener. For a question for the Magnet Weekly CTF. So for those of you who are doing the challenge, it is 7 parts. I'll let you know how far you have to go down that rabbit hole, because right now you have to unlock to see something. So I guess that's a little bit of a hint. There's 7 different parts to this challenge.
One question.
To one question. So when I reached out to Aaron, I was like, hey, can you write one memory question on this image? And I don't want it to be something that was a memory question from the Magnet Virtual Summit CTF, because it's the same image. And by the way, I want you guys to understand how cool that is, that you can take images, and even though they are very small scenario images and not that large, there is so much complexity to them that you can go after so many different things. So Aaron wrote a 7-part question. And for those of you who are listening to this afterwards, in 2 weeks from now, there will be slews of write-ups on the internet that both share the question without the answer, so you can go ahead and give it a try. The images are all available publicly, and you can go ahead and test your knowledge on these 7 questions. They'll be in all the write-ups, and you can see all the different ways people will solve them. And in 2 weeks, you'll get to see Aaron walk through the solve, which is awesome. But I can tell you that people are a little bit stuck on one part. Because I went and I looked, I both asked in the Discord channel, hey, what do you guys want to know about? And then I looked at where it looks like people have momentum in the time that they're answering and where they're getting stuck. And I was wondering if you could maybe share a hint, but folks are getting stuck on understanding how to find a virtual address in memory.
Well, ironically enough, I will be doing a live demo on Friday during my presentation that may, if you pay somewhat close attention, you would see a workflow that you could duplicate and come up with the answer.
Well, there you go. So there's the hint, everyone. If you're stuck, or even if you're not stuck and you want to know some awesome memory stuff, Aaron's going to be applying some of the techniques that you can use to get to this answer as he walks through his walkthrough in his presentation this Friday at Sands. The link is in the chat right now if you're on the YouTube, and if you're not, the name of what you're going to Google for that Sands broadcast is using memory for code injection analysis. And if you Google that with Aaron's name, you'll come up with the talk. The great thing is it'll be recorded. So then next week, is it next week or the week after? On the 10th.
I feel like it's the following week.
I feel like it's next week, though,
Like
Aaron.
the 12th or something like that.
No, it's the 10th. It's Thursday. So this Friday, you're doing your Sands Talk. Thursday, December 10th. I'm really excited about this because we're doing a memory day at HTCIA. And you're going to, I feel like I've got the 3 memory mavens. That's what I'm going to call the 3 of you together. So got Aaron, have Alyssa Torres, who's been a guest before. We've got Jamie Levy, who I know the schedule, Aklita. The schedule hasn't been released, but she is going to be a guest in January on Cash Up. So super exciting. But all 3 of you are going to be doing memory presentations. What's yours on?
So mine's going to piggyback some of the stuff that you and I have sort of been discussing over the last probably 2 years through a couple of webinars that we did with Magnet, and then also with our most recent Sands DFIR Summit presentation that we did this last summer. And I think, it's going to be on investigating the user, so user investigations with memory, because I feel, and reasonably so, most people, I feel like they associate memory analysis with intrusion investigations, network intrusion investigations. And there are a lot of folks and peers that, that are taught collect memory, but then they have this sort of unstructured data set that a lot of forensic tools don't know how to properly parse and analyze, and outside of maybe stream-based data carving. And so my presentation is going to be more focused on how can you take a very targeted approach to look at a memory image, profile the user, get some really good usable, you could actually you can solve the entire case in memory before you have to go to disk, and then you can just go to disk or the file system to validate your findings in memory.
So you and I have spent a lot of time focusing together on using memory in end user investigations. And I think one of the unique things that you bring as somebody who started in Nitro, learned about doing intrusion-based investigations, got heavily vested in memory, but is also working for the Portland Police Bureau, where you do end user investigations as part of your job, as any department would. You've built up such a great workflow and set in some of the things like our presentation at the Sands DFIR Summit and the workflow guide that we've wrote is really a workflow for going through using memory in end user investigations. But the point you brought up most is sometimes you can solve everything in memory. And even more importantly, sometimes you can solve everything in memory before you're done making the image.
Correct.
and the speed.
And our data set, and this is not a spoiler alert, it is the moneymaker data set. The moneymaker data set is a great illustration of that, because you can clearly solve the entire case before you would be done imaging the laptop.
Absolutely.
And when we say solve the case, you would have access to the evidence that answers all the questions. And of course there's going to be follow-up after that, but the bulk of your heavy lifting or your work is done within, with a reasonable workflow, you would have it done in an hour and a half.
And then you can take those locations and do your validation and verification on disk forensics, and maybe find more substantiating and additional evidentiary value. But the whole fact that you already have all of that targeted insights is extraordinarily valuable.
Yeah, especially I think in, modern day, with the number of devices that the average consumer has, and then the amount of data that is stored or capable of storing per device, those days of search warrant being done or collecting the devices, whether you're in the private sector, and you have this shopping cart full of stuff that would represent a haystack, and you just let it on fire with gasoline until you get to the needle. Nowadays, I feel like they're wheeling in a shopping cart full of needles, and they're saying, find me a needle in the needle stack, where I can't pour gas on that and burn the haystack down. And being able to analyze memory is kind of like burning that haystack down, because you're working with a much smaller data set that is still artifact rich.
Absolutely.
That has a lot of your really juicy artifacts that you like on disk. So the MFT and prefetch and
link files, event logs.
I mean, and then you can even
pulling event logs from inside link files, all kinds of great stuff.
So shell bags and shim cache and just all of these great artifacts that people naturally gravitate towards disk or in the file system. You can pull that from memory. I mean, USB, right? So connected devices and network connected devices and all of these great things that will build that story for you. But instead of doing it from a 1 terabyte drive on the laptop, you're dealing with an 8 gig RAM dump, physical memory dump, and it's so much quicker.
Attribution can happen in memory. That is so awesome. And actually, your memory challenge shows some of that this week, which is kind of cool.
Yes, yeah, and I think too, one of the neat things about, since we're talking about the moneymaker case, one of the neat things about it too that hopefully should resonate with folks that maybe especially the ICAC folks. Or folks that are maybe dealing with insiders that are taking information, is you could potentially recover files from pool memory, from kernel memory, that were never actually written to disk. That maybe came from an device.
Yeah.
Right. So if you didn't do memory analysis and you seize the device, you might see that a thumb drive was plugged in, or you might see a link file for a particular file or object that you're interested in, but you couldn't recover it because you don't have it. But it's possible that you could recover it in memory.
So, Lori just asked a question. She said, okay, maybe a stupid question. Why are we still trying to convince people on collecting memory?
I don't think we are. I think it's not so much that. I think that has been in people's workflow for a decade or more. I think that, and this is me talking, and this is just collective experience from just, talking with peers. It is when I sample my peers and they all they're like, yep, I collect it. Well, how many of you actually analyze it? Yeah, they just don't know, right? And so
I think it's intimidating to folks. And I would say for those of you who are intimidated by memory, run it through Axiom. We do have several volatility plugins. We will stream carve, etc. But really, Memproc FS, I feel like Memproc FS is a game changer because it presents memory like a file system.
Yep.
So I think for people who are intimidated by the command line, which I hope you wouldn't be, but I understand that there are people who are, Memproc FS is your friend. And Aaron and I showed a lot of how to do something in volatility, but also how to do it in Memproc FS in that DFIR Summit presentation. And you're totally your friend. So I kind of want to jump back and share. And Kevin's saying that Memproc FS is an absolute game changer, that it makes navigating so much easier. And it really does. It's super quick to use. I love it. Check out the the forensic lunch, and I can't remember the name of the gentleman who created Memproc FS, but there's a great forensic lunch where he's interviewed if you want to know all of the ins and outs of things he's doing. And thank you, Kevin, for dropping the link to Memproc FS. Awesome. Kevin is the best, by the way. Kevin's our producer, and if I can give him a shout out, I am, because I didn't prep that link for him, and he just found it and did it, and you're awesome, Kevin. So when you and I first met and we started chatting, it was way back several years ago at an HTCIA event.
Do you
remember
yep.
this?
Yeah, it was in Anaheim, I think.
Anaheim, and we were at HTCIA, and we were having a good time, and we were chatting and talking, and we met subsequently at different years at HTCIA. I used to get excited about going to HTCIA because I knew I'd run into Aaron. I'm still excited about HTCIA events, but it was like, people who you're going to see at different conferences. And we just got into this amazing discourse going back and forth. And what I've got to tell you is, if you ever want to collaborate with somebody, one of the most fun people, and I'm saying this from experience, to collaborate with is Aaron, because you will never find somebody who, if you are passionate and intense about a subject, who will match you on it. And Aaron's matched me every single time on intensity.
I don't know about that. But that's, thank you.
but both like when we're delving into the technical topic and writing 100 slides for a 30-minute presentation, which we've done.
We cut it down to 100 slides.
Cut it down to 100 slides and decided it was 3 presentations. And we still have, just for people who are wondering, the 5 presentations Aaron and I have done together started off as 1, and we still have 1 left. I think we have 2 left.
We
actually have enough slides. We can, from our leftover slides that are in our archive, that are grouped by topic, we've got 2 more topics to cover.
Oh, at least, yeah. And there's probably stuff to add to those by now too.
That's the other thing. It's because then we add, and then we wind up going, oh look, we've got 3 more presentations. But I'm just saying, Aaron, you are one of the most fantastic people I've ever collaborated with or worked with, because you match me moment for moment on intensity, and you're also just fun in terms of not just the intensity, but hanging out and talking about different things. And we both have a shared love for Cliff Stoll.
We do, yeah.
And just nerding out about books. Some of my best book recommendations have come from Aaron, and you're just so incredible. So people need to know that.
Well, thank you. I feel the same about you.
Oh, well, thank you. So, you do all these incredible things. You create all of these resources. What's your go-to resource?
Oh, wow. So I don't have a single go-to resource. I still love the printed word. I still love books. So, and that might just be, I'm definitely a lot older than I sound, because I know that if I was to listen to myself, I would sound like a 12-year-old boy. But I might just be my age. I have a whole host, at home at my desk, I've probably got 9 books sitting there right now. The biggest one that I reference the most frequently is definitely going to be The Art of Memory Forensics. This is one of those books that's just constantly getting, I have 3 copies of it, one here in the office, 1 at home, and then 1 that both Andrew and Michael signed for me, because I took their class years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was before, really volatility had taken off. The book had just come out, maybe a month before the course, and I got it, and I just flew down with it, and I was lucky enough to take the class from both Andrew and Michael, and they signed the book, so I got that one kind of tucked away. But online resources, the Sans DFIR YouTube site is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
This Week in Forensics, come on, right?
It's I search This Week in Forensics. I use it as a Google to find something on a topic.
Hands down, if you can't find it in This Week in Forensics, then it probably doesn't exist. That's my disclaimer. It is overwhelming, the amount of data that those 2 throw into that site, and just the hours of my life I spend just clicking links and reading blogs or looking at, information. That's a great site. For anything Mac, because I am kind of a Mac nerd, it's definitely going to be, Sarah's website, or Patrick Wardle, his website.
Oh, yes.
as well. So those are
and
probably
any of the Objective by the Sea videos.
the Objective by the Sea videos are incredible. So all of those are free and online, and all those talks are great. And then
I've never seen an Objective by the Sea video I didn't enjoy.
no, they're
Erica,
actually
Richie Cyrus, like just incredible.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and they're interesting topics. There's a really good book for folks that maybe want to get sort of into malware analysis and a little bit of memory forensics that's not super overwhelming. It's really well written and really well put together. And it's about 1.5 to 2 years old. Actually, I have a copy right here next to my desk. I have no affiliation, so this is just going to be a shameless plug. But from Manapa, I don't know if you can see this.
And put it right in front of your chest.
Right in front of my chest?
There you go. Perfect. Learning Malware Analysis. It's a packed ebook.
Yep. So this
Who's
is
the author?
It's Manapa Ka. So he's got a couple talks online too. He does a lot of stuff with Black Hat. So he does a lot of Black Hat presentations, and he teaches at Black Hat. But that's a really good go-to resource. I have a couple copies of this book as well. I have at least 2 copies of every book. You got to have one at home and one in the office.
I have one in the office and one at home. Yep, absolutely.
And then, quite frankly, one of the things that I have found to be the most refreshing about this community is how openly approachable everyone is. And so my biggest resource is I go straight to the source. So if I will figure it out or do my best to figure it out myself. And then if I don't know, I have no problem DMing Eric Zimmerman and asking him a question, or I have no problem DMing MHL, Michael Hill, one of the core volatility authors, has over the years just been phenomenal at he's quick to respond to my questions, super helpful. I definitely would not be where I am now understanding it without him taking the time to explain stuff. So I'll just go straight to the author of the tool. I'll go straight to the author of the book. And even Manapa, I was just texting back and forth with him yesterday about some stuff because he's going to allow me to use a couple of his illustrations for my presentations. And so
that's awesome.
I think for folks that might be new to the community, listen to this. The community is super approachable.
Totally.
Not everybody, but I would say.
I think for the most part, people are.
Community I've probably ever been involved in. It's not dumb question kid, go away. It's oh, you're interested. Let me explain this to you, or let me. They'll fire back with 6 links to 6 different resources, or sometimes you'll get just call me, and I do that to folks too. People will hit me up with questions, and I'll be here's my number, just call me. Let's walk through this. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're trying to do.
Because we all grow from each other. And the reason that you're open to helping people is because people have been open to helping you. I remember sitting in your lab working with you on something, and we were messaging Eric Zimmerman, asking him questions to do some incorporation. I was just going back and forth with him. And we got it done. Huh?
I think. That was for Automate?
Yeah, that was when we were setting up Automate, and we were trying to get some things to work together, and we got it right. And that's it. And it was just a couple of DMs back and forth. Oh, okay, yeah, that's how we do it. Yep. And some. Well, why do you want to do that? Yeah, did for this, blah blah blah. And it's just good collaboration. And then we just make things better for every other else. And then if you write about it, or you share about it, or the tool gets adapted for the thing, or whatever it is, it just betters everybody. So having those conversations, nobody knows what's going on with anybody else unless you ask the questions. And a lot of times it's, oh yeah, I've seen that too. Or, oh, you know what? I haven't looked into that, but it deserves a bigger look into if that's something that you're seeing. So it's kind of just reach out. I love it. So is there maybe a story you can share about how you've used memory in a case before?
Well, so I use it in every case I can, and I've had numerous wins, clearly on the Nitro side, and I think they're on the incident response side, the network intrusion side, and I think there are plenty of publicly available presentations or blog entries, but what we don't see a lot of is publications of wins maybe on a or IR,
right.
Piece. And I've definitely had it on the end user investigation. And I can think of one that really stands out where without it, we would not have been successful. And this was one where we have a separate unit that does all of our child abuse type stuff and child exploitation cases. And they were going out to serve a search warrant. They consulted with us to see if we would be available. I was actually on vacation, but I answer my phone all the time. So I answered my phone. Yep. And so they kind of walked me through what they were doing. And there was, you get that, well, this person might be tech savvy, might not be tech savvy. And they're like, this person's tech savvy, whatever that means, fill in the blank. And I said, well, in that case, if you get there and the machines are up and running, you're going to need to grab memory. And so I walked them through how to set up the magnets RAM capture tool on a thumb drive, because it's pretty straightforward and pretty straightforward collection. So they roll out, machines are on, they collect memory, they break everything down, fast forward, whatever, a couple weeks later in the lab. And one of the main PC towers, like all of them, had multiple hard drives in it. So remove the hard drives, start imaging. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, this is interesting, because I always do a quick little check, and the data structure was not looking like a Windows operating system. And so usually that's like one of two things for me. It's usually either encrypted, because you can tell, by the pattern that it's more than likely encrypted, or it's Linux.
Right.
And looking at it, I was like, well, it's definitely not Linux. And I was like, hey, I really don't think it's encrypted. And I couldn't figure it out. And I went ahead and I imaged it anyway. And I looked at it again, and I'm like, I know what it is. It's a RAID. They raided this thing. So I have X-Ways. I couldn't get the RAID to rebuild. And so I was like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, they grab memory. So I grabbed RAM. I'd already done this already. I'd already done some stuff with memory. But what I didn't do, because I didn't really need it, was I didn't pull out and grab the user's login credentials. So if you look at our presentation, you can do hash dump, grab the NTLM hash, and then crack that. And so I did that. I was able to get the user's login creds, basically put the PC back together, fired it up, logged in with the login password, it rebuilt the RAID, and then I just did a live
You did a live acquisition of the rebuilt RAID.
And then
brilliant.
Boom.
But had you not had the memory, had nobody acquired the memory, you would have been out of luck.
Out of luck. Unless there was some way I could have rebuilt that RAID. And it was just, I tried and it wouldn't rebuild. And so, that could have just been beyond my skill set too, but was definitely throwing everything I knew at it. And then just sort of thinking outside the box. It's like, well, we hate, at that point we kind of forced our hand. And so, or forced my hand. And I was like, well, I'm just going to put this thing back together. I'm going to boot it up, document my process, log in, and it was like, boom. And I was like, oh, okay. And so had we not done that, would not have got the evidence that they would have needed for their case.
Absolutely.
So that's a huge win, I think.
It's
and that's just one of those examples where it was just something as simple as being able to get the user's login to fire up the system so that the system could rebuild that RAID to image it.
And what's really cool is all of those steps are on that memory workflow diagram that you and I drafted as part of that SANS presentation. So that's a quick win if you just need a reference for that.
Super quick win, especially if they have a weak password, which most people do.
Rainbow tables.
Yeah.
So what about when you're not doing forensics? I know that you do a lot of forensics outside of work as a hobby, but what else makes you tick that's not DFIR?
That's a really good question. So work keeps me busy because I have other things within the Bureau that I do. Those things keep me very, very busy and consume a lot of my free time as well, that outside of the world of forensics. But the only real hobby that I took up maybe about a decade ago was jiu-jitsu. So unfortunately, COVID has kind of shut that down. But for the last decade, that's my free time hobby was the jits with jiu-jitsu.
The jits with jiu-jitsu. I love it. I love it. What a fun and focused way to keep your body in shape and your mental focus.
It's super nerdy. It's super cerebral.
Right. It's so mental, but still physical. That's what I love about that.
That's probably what hooked me to it, was just the very cerebral nature of that sport, or martial art, if you will, whatever you want to call it.
I love that. I love how how you found something that's still a way to be part of the D4 Fit, right? Keeping exercise not just behind the screen, but also something that uses your brain at the same time. I couldn't picture you doing something that didn't.
Right. Yeah, something. There's always got to be something. I'm too ADD or too just sort of like high energy to not do something.
You had a very serendipitous or frenetic way of getting, probably both, way of coming into DFIR. But nowadays things are a little bit different than the time frame when you came in. For those folks who are looking to break into the field, to get their start, to work towards their first position, what's kind of the advice you would give to someone looking to get started?
Oh boy. That is such a broad question. I would say there's no easy one answer to that. I think the big thing is like, by all means, embrace your like intellectual curiosity. So, and I will tell you this, and this is me talking, and I would be happy and more than willing to, bet beverages of choice on this. There is no one set formula for success.
Yes.
And success is you as the individual need to define and measure what your level of success is within anything that you do, and not just with this community, with anything that you do. So I would set goals, obviously, but always be curious, always ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. This is one of those industries and communities where you should constantly be asking questions, and not just questions for the sake of to fill in a gap, a knowledge gap. One of the things I like about what we do here, and it goes back probably to how I got into this field, because again, I didn't come in I didn't start with, your traditional file system level forensics where it's like very kind of formulated. I came in with an incident response model, and an incident response model is a little bit different, right? It's more, let's triage things and let's move a little bit quicker with purpose, but we're still doing things forensically. And so going back to when I say question things, don't be afraid to question, like, is there a different way or a better way that we could do this? Or, hey, we're doing it this way, but why are we doing this way? And does it make sense to do it this way? And is there another way that we could do it that would get the same results or more results, but might be a better process? And so I would say don't be afraid to have that voice, because you're gonna, especially the newer folks, they always come in, with newer information, newer techniques, exposure to maybe newer tools that those of us that have kind of maybe been in the industry for a while get sort of set in our ways. And so it's great when new folks come in and they're like, hey, I just came out of this course and they were showing us this. And I'm usually like, awesome, like show me that. Like I want to see that. It's like, oh, totally integrate this or adopt this because it makes sense. The other thing I would say is don't, I wouldn't worry so much about the certifications and stuff initially. I would say focus first on understanding what it is that you need to understand. Like understand the fundamentals and the foundations and the basics. Like understand the file system. If you're predominantly working with Windows systems, like really understand the Windows operating system. If you're going to be doing stuff like incident response and malware, then start understanding like, the lower level parts of the operating system, right? And then you start to get into, how memory works, how the register works, how all of these different things work. Because once you understand that, all the other stuff just sort of falls into place. And then it also helps you when you get stuck to start going off in these other different directions, because you have a really solid foundation in how everything is interconnected. And then you're just like, you're rocking and rolling. And
we need to bring back.
Yeah, your learning curve is so much steeper if you do that, and it's hard to do. Like, hard? It is tricky to do because it can seem mundane and it can seem boring and it can seem like less sexy, if you will. But it is
like you get things better, like you get things quicker. Concepts click. Like Windows internals
Right.
That is a beast. But you know what? I feel like
Yep.
we need to get the book club started again and
Yep.
start like sharing and reading some of these because like you said, it's hard. David Cowan did a book club for Windows internals at one point, and it is hard to chew through. But if you have that goal of every week having read a chapter and you're having a discussion about it on like a Sunday afternoon or whatever, it really gives you that motivation. I feel like we need to get the books club started. If anybody's interested in getting a fundamentals book club started again, let me know because I will nerd out with you on some chapters. Like you're right. You brought up so many good things.
And
Like,
I'm going to throw this one other thing in there
yeah,
that sort of there are so many great like CTFs going on right now, and then there's so many great older CTFs. The one thing I would tell folks is if you see an older CTF or if you pick up a book and the book is like, here is the data set to work through these problems, and the data set is XP and Windows 7, don't get hung up on that. Like, don't worry if it's not
yes,
Windows 10, the latest release. Like, because if you can work with a older operating system that might be a little less complex, you will start to understand those basic fundamentals of that operating system that carry all the way through every development
yes.
of that system. So it's like saying, "Oh, I want to go run a marathon right off the couch." There's very few people that can do that. So you have to start somewhere, right? And so starting somewhere, I would say, don't scoff it because I see it happen. People are like, "Oh, they're giving us an example and it's an XP memory image or it's a Windows 7 memory image." And I'm like,
It
so
doesn't
what?
matter. You're
Like
still learning fundamentals.
the process you're going to use on this XP or Windows 7 memory image, you're going to do the same thing on a Windows 10, or you're going to do the same thing on a Linux memory image, or the same thing on a Mac memory image. It's understanding the process and don't get hung up on, this data set that this instructor is providing me or that this CTF has. It's like, just focus on, you know, the process of getting to what you need. Don't worry about that.
But this is a really valid point because let's say you're learning Mac forensics and you pick up a book and everything you're doing or all the sample images you get are HFS plus and not APFS. That is okay. Do you know why? Because it is an even better skill to be able to apply the methodology to a different file system and try to learn a new file system, to be
Totally.
able to adapt and move. If you only ever learn Windows forensics and things change and you only ever learn Windows forensics on Windows 10 and you work in an environment, maybe you're in a corporate environment where all of your systems are the same, it's going to be much harder for you to adapt to change. Whereas if you're able to take your methodologies and apply them across a broad range of file and operating systems, you're going to be that much better for it, and you'll recognize things when they're different and how to recognize things, like understanding the difference between an MFT and inodes when in what you're getting on your FS stat, when you're in autopsy, understanding why you're seeing those differences between Linux and Windows and what you're seeing, that's important to understand. So those things are very valuable. I agree wholeheartedly. You brought up some really cool points. So the
Well,
first
thank you.
thing that you said was you really like focused on this ask questions thing. And I think that's really important, not just because of the fact that you shouldn't be afraid to ask questions, but that there are unanswered questions in our field. So
Oh,
you may
absolutely.
be asking something that there is no answer for yet. And that gives you the opportunity to find that answer, do that work, own that resolution, and share it. And what you learn in that process of trying to answer an unanswered question is amazing. Brett's saying it always comes down to mastering the foundational basics, and it's 100%. And so you brought up that whole thing also about, hey, I came into this different because I had an IR methodology. And that is so key. Like when I came into digital forensics, I came at it from a reverse engineering and chip off perspective, right? Like
Sure.
we all come at things differently, but what it does is it provides different perspectives to build what you were just talking about, those new processes and new methods and smarter ways to look at things, like how you do a lot of memory analysis first to save time because you have more of a triage based, memory based skill set, and how you've applied that to end user investigations and in a lot of ways changed the way some officers are approaching end user tasks. And that is great. And it's only because you had a different perspective. And that's what's so great about everybody who's had all these different backgrounds to how they came into the field, like what it does for us. um, and you spoke about not worrying about certs initially. And I thought that that's really key. You know, to be honest, it makes me sad when people pay thousands of dollars out of pocket for a cert um, before they get started, because really I'd rather, or I'd hope that you'd find an employer who would pay for the cert, because that's what that
I
pricing
waited
model is based on.
years. I waited years before I did mine. I really partly, not to interrupt, but
No, please.
they're probably like, well, whatever, guy, because like she opens up with this big long laundry list of these certs.
That's
Quite
true.
frankly, I did those in a very condensed amount of time. I dedicated a couple years to really understanding not just the foundation, but I also want to understand like what part of this field do I like? What do I gravitate to, and what naturally makes sense and clicks with me? And so I found that, and I was like, well, I want to build upon this. And then I started looking at like, okay, well, what certs would be available to me? And then I looked at those, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to take this year and I'm going to focus on those just to kind of get those done and get that out of the way, if you will. But it wasn't. I was probably 4 years in before I did a cert.
And that's okay. There are plenty of people who don't have certs. You know, I'm going to say the other thing about certs is it really depends on your employer or
Oh,
who you're
totally.
looking to work for, because there are
Absolutely.
certain places where you need a cert to start. And that's okay. Like my guide is always look at the requirements of the jobs that you're interested in, and if you need a cert, go at that cert. But the point of learning those fundamentals and focusing on that you're saying that that's where your focus should be on mastering the basics, master understanding file systems, master understanding structures, master how data is stored. I mean, test, play with your data. You really encourage people to do CTFs, the old CTFs. Brett, I know you just commented.
Build your own data and then test that. Like that is
Yes.
the best way, because then it's like, I mean, that's what we did with Moneymaker, right? Like we
Yeah.
built our own data, and then it's there because you put it there, and now you can test and go find it and be like, aha. Or if for whatever reason your methodology or tool doesn't get you to where you think you're going to go, then you can kind of scratch your head and go, well, why didn't that work? So I think sometimes just building your own data and utilizing your own data is as valuable or more valuable than using someone else's.
100% testing and learning about how data is stored is absolutely critical and incredible. DFIR.training has a whole bunch of past CTFs, as does About DFIR. So if you're looking for listed as CTFs, try that. Check out the Magnet Weekly CTF. There's one going on memory right now, 7 challenges written by Aaron. What's cool about that is we actually have a tips and tricks this Thursday. Tara Melton will be walking through how to process memory in Axiom. So if you've never done it before, you can learn that and see that and just play with this challenge. And there will be several weeks more of challenges. Lanita Hinch, Tara Melton, and Jamie Tubbs have also written challenges for memory. So lots of opportunity to play with memory if you haven't. I hope Aaron's encouraged you to do it.
Which I haven't scared you off.
Lori mentioned that job ads have certs as required these days. And that was kind of my point. Look at the positions that are available, but then tailor what you're targeting for what you need. But I'm going to give one other piece of advice. Don't not apply for a job because you don't tick every box. Please.
Oh,
please,
absolutely.
Please.
Yeah.
Most jobs ads are either written for somebody specific, and that's why they have such specificity, or, which unfortunately that does happen, guys, and gals, and thems, everyone, or it's written to have everything that they wish. It's like a wish list, but it's like a unicorn. Nobody's going to have that. So still apply, still go out there. And especially if you've mastered the fundamentals, if you've gotten some challenges out there, if you've shared some of the questions that you've answered and you've blogged about them and you can substantiate that you know what you're doing, don't be afraid because you've mastered those fundamentals. Like, right? Like, would you agree with that, Aaron?
I would totally agree with that.
Thank you so much for being our guest today. You were amazing.
Well, thank you. It's amazing how fast time flies when you and I are hanging out chatting.
Well, we could go days.
We could, yeah.
I always love chatting with you. You were so awesome. I hope everyone checks out all the amazing content that you're putting out and sharing. Your presentation this Friday with Sands, link is in the chat. Your presentation at HTCIA next week, plays with your forensics challenges you have, reaches out to you on Twitter and starts following you. Thank you for everything you're giving to the community. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, always. Thank you.
Next week, our guest is going to be Catherine Headley, who is incredible. Speaking of foundations, wrote one of the co-authors of the SANS 4308 class, which is all about foundations in digital forensics, as well as a big proponent and one of the motivators in the D4Fit movement. Full schedule for upcoming episodes is for the end of the year is on magnetforensics.com. I've got to update with all the wonderful people who are booked for January and February. But coming up after that, we've got Richard Davis, Mary Ellen Kennel, and Kim Bradley. And also, I'll give you a little future tidbit. The Magnet Virtual Summit. Yes, the 2021 Summit will be virtual. It will be in May. And the CFP will be opening later this week. So keep your eyes out for that. And we hope to see what you have to share. See you next week on Cash App. Thanks, everyone. Bye.